We could just be a few hours away now from a big announcement. Rishi Sunak is tipped to make that announcement imminently on the latest government action on the Post Office Horizon scandal.
Yeah, comes as the former boss of the Post Office, Paula Venables, handed back her CBE after growing public pressure, and that petition, which had received more than 1 million signatures. Post Office Minister Kevin Hollindrake joins us now from Westminster. We spoke to you, Mr Hollindrake, last week, and things have continued apace, all in the wake of this remarkable drama. What is the Prime Minister going to announce today? Because there are hundreds of wrongfully convicted individuals who need to know what's going to happen to them today.
Well, I don't know what the Prime Minister is going to announce today, but you're right to say we've been working at pace. Met the Justice Secretary only the day before yesterday to discuss what we might do. We're very keen to make sure that as many people get access to justice and compensation as quickly as possible. We've compensated 64% of postmasters so far, £148 million. But there are some people still waiting for compensation, particularly those with convictions. The process of overturning those convictions has been much slower than we anticipated, and far fewer people coming forward than we anticipated. We're keen to look at innovative solutions, pretty unusual solutions, it's fair to say, unprecedented solutions to try and find a quicker method of getting compensation and justice to these people. That's what we're in discussions right now about.
You say you won't speculate on exactly what it is he's going to say, but OK, let's put the question slightly differently. Is this going to be a holding statement, or, as expected, is it going to be what you might call a dynamic statement?
Well, I think when whoever comes forward with the statement, be it Prime Minister or others, it will not just be a holding statement. I said on the floor of the House this week that we would come back to the House this week with to say what the solution we thought the solution will be. That will happen this week. I can't promise it'll happen today because these are very significant issues. What Parliament tries to avoid doing at all costs, and very rarely does, is interfere with the independent judicial process. So one of the options here is a blanket overturning of all convictions. That's the quickest option, but it is pretty unprecedented. It's a very significant step, and we'll take that step very carefully. So we need to look at all the different implications of that before we make that kind of decision.
So the statement is definitely then going to be about the overturning of these wrongful convictions rather than compensation. This is the first thing that's going to happen.
There's the two things are linked, so the statement will come together. So the first thing for people to get compensation, they've got to overturn the conviction. So the one thing leads to another. The compensation scheme is already established. When people get through that hurdle of overturning the convictions, they can choose two routes. They can go for a detailed assessment of their loss, including impacts on themselves as well as their financial loss, or they can take a fixed sum award, which doesn't require any assessment of loss, of £600,000. So that can happen very, very quickly once people have overturned their conviction.
So can I just need to establish, because we're not only talking about people who are wrongly convicted, we're talking about thousands of others who were wrongly accused, but whose cases may not have resulted in a conviction or even coming to court. But to establish first, you can tell the hundreds of people with wrongful convictions, and the numbers range between 700, some people have reported, and 980, another figure that's been reported. So let's say best part of 1,000 people have been wrongly convicted of either theft, fraud, false accounting or other offences due to the central lie that there was no fault with the Horizon IT system when we know for a fact there was. So for those hundreds of people and the best part of 1,000 people, you can confidently say that by the end of Prime Minister's questions today, they will know that those convictions, through some mechanism, will be overturned.
Well, that's not what I've said on either of those things, actually. I don't know whether the Prime Minister's going to announce that today, and also the solution isn't the one necessarily the one you've described, but that's the one we'd all like to get to. There's only two ways of doing this. Either you overturn convictions on a case-by-case basis, which takes a long time, and people don't necessarily want to come forward. And currently, they have to do that to get that conviction overturned. And many people are clearly reluctant to come forward, just don't want anything to do with this anymore because of how it's affected their lives.
OK, so you're suggesting that that mechanism isn't going to be what the Prime Minister announced because it's too complex and you have hundreds of people who have lost complete faith in the justice system who don't want to come forward. So we can rule that out.
That's the downside with that particular solution. The other solution is a blanket overturning of all convictions en bloc, which is a very significant step because of what it means is Parliament interfering with the independent judicial process, which is something we don't want to do. Ideally, we don't want to do, but this is not an ideal case. We're not in a perfect world here at all. So we know we need to do something potentially very significant.
If that is the option that's taken, and it is looking, I mean, the word in Westminster is that is what it's going to be. I know you can't officially confirm it here, but that's what we're all hearing. Would you expect that to get support from both sides of the House?
Well, we very much hope that, because there's been calls, if that's the solution we adopt, because there have been calls for it from both sides of the House, including, I think, the opposition who said wanted something that dealt with this en masse. So you would very much hope that's the case. But I think anybody can see, and there are, in Parliament there's lots of legal minds, lots of people from the legal background, and there are different views on this. Some people we shouldn't interfere with the judicial process. Some people are saying we should. It's not an easy balance to strike, but nevertheless, we understand what we need to do here. We, like everybody else, are appalled at what's happened, and we know we need to do something very significant because this is just not working out as we thought it would when those first convictions were overturned.
No,
so we need to do something different.
And let me take you back to one of those first convictions. This is a former postmaster, Parmad Kalia, who was convicted in 2001 and sentenced to 6 months in jail after being falsely accused of stealing £22,000. He waited 20 years for his conviction to be overturned in May 2021. And you say that needs to happen before compensation is paid out. He's received no compensation at all. Let's just have a listen to his experience.
It's destroyed me mentally. I've just cooked it up within myself, build-up of not knowing what it was, no one to talk to, no one to discuss it with. I've lost 21 years of my life, no earning capacity. I've had a breakdown with my family, my wife, my children, shame in the community. I've attempted suicide on 3 occasions since then as well.
I mean, you listen to Parmad, you listen to anyone in the same situation, and we've heard from so many, totally heartbreaking. But only a third of those who've already had their convictions overturned have received full and final settlement compensation.
Well, there's a number of different things. I mean, the third you talk about, third of 93, there's been a big step forward in recent months. We brought forward this fixed sum award, and that number's gone from 5 to 30 very quickly. So things are moving forward with people who have had their convictions overturned. Mr. Carley is a slightly different case. It's a case we are looking at, and because the evidence doesn't necessarily relate to Horizon in that particular case, it's called a public interest case, but it's something I'm talking to the advisory board about. We have an advisory board that that oversees all 3 compensation schemes, and on that board sits James Arbuthnot, Lord Arbuthnot, who features in the dramatisation, and Kevin Jones, another leading member of Parliament who's also campaigned on this issue, and some other legal experts. So we are looking at this case, these kind of cases, and we are determined to try and find a solution when that solution does come forward that covers Mr. Carley's case as well.
Let's hope that happens on this very day, as Churchill would have said, action this day. I do want to move you on, as Post Office Minister, to this question. As you say, Susanna, this story has been building apace over the last 7 or 8 days. I've never known anything like it, actually, as a building story. And Fujitsu, the company at the centre of all this, has increasingly emerged into the picture. Nick Wallace is a journalist who wrote the book about the scandal. He was one of the first to actually expose it in all its detail. He said the following, if I can just quote this to you. This is what he said in an interview. You have Fujitsu not admitting in various witness statements of the bugs that they knew about. And then he says, and he holds this up on his tablet, you get this email from a senior lawyer within the post office telling a Fujitsu engineer that his job during the trial is to preserve the Horizon system. And this suggests that the prosecutors were engaged in secrecy. This is evidence tampering, isn't it?
Well, it's evidence. I say we've got a statutory inquiry which is set up by Parliament to look at all those issues and find out who's responsible. I think, Richard, you've just identified one of the problems there are here is that was that then the responsibility of Fujitsu or the Post Office or both of them? And what you've got to go through is a process. You gather the evidence. Sir Wyn Williams, who's the chair of the inquiry, will come to a conclusion on all those things, hopefully by the end of this year, and then report. And then we can decide what we do and who we hold responsible, both financially and potentially legally, and the potential prosecutions could flow from this. So all those things need to be established first. We get the evidence, we find the conclusions, and then we take action.
Have you seen,
and that's absolutely the right way to do it.
Except that there are a couple of obstacles to that. There's a report in the Telegraph which says that one of the Fujitsu engineers says that they will only give evidence, the evidence that we require to get to the bottom of this, if they're granted immunity from prosecution. So it looks like either you get the evidence or you get the prosecutions. But in some cases, they won't be giving evidence if it might lead to prosecution. That's going to be a stumbling block, isn't it?
Well, I don't think so, and I think that's absolutely the wrong approach for that person to take if those reports are true. So Wyn Williams, as I understand it, does have has rejected that position from that individual,
twice,
and
yes.
also does have the power as a statutory inquiry.
So how do you get the evidence then if they won't appear?
Well, the statutory inquiry does have the power to make sure witnesses do give evidence, but clearly our crime agencies, our police, definitely have that capability.
So he can be subpoenaed then, effectively, to appear in front of the inquiry?
As far as I understand, that's the case, but certainly nothing ever stopped the police going knocking on somebody's door and asking for evidence of somebody under caution. And
we're out of time, but I just want a yes or no answer to this, if you don't mind. You mentioned the £600,000 figure that is automatically going to be available. Do they have to pay tax on that, or is it tax-free?
I think it is tax-free as far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm aware, but I will check on that, Richard, for you.
All right, fine.
OK.
Thank you.
And finally, last week, when you were on our programme, you called on Paula Venables to hand back her CBE.
Yeah.
She did that yesterday. Is that sufficient? Because a lot of people say she should hand back her performance-related bonus because contributions to that bonus were made when these post office workers, these staff, trusted members of their community, paid money to the post office, which wasn't missing in the first place.
Well, she's done the right thing by handing that back, and I think that was the first time I'd called Paula Venables to do that on your show. So I think it's the right thing. I think what we need to do now, as I said at the time, we don't want to have trial by media here. There is a process going on with the inquiry. It should identify who's responsible. And at that point in time, when we've identified that, other sanctions may be available. It may be to do with bonuses. It may be to do with prosecutions. All those things are possible once we have the evidence and the conclusions.
All right.
OK.
Kevin Hollindrake, the Postal Services Minister, thank you for being with us last week and this morning.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thank you.
And we look forward to hearing what happens at Prime Minister's questions. Thank you very much indeed.